Hey, Cameron Coward here, and today I'm going to review the new AnkerMake M5C 3D printer. AnkerMake is a new player in the 3D printing industry, but you're probably already familiar with Anker and their smartphone products. I'm not quite sure why they decided to get into the 3D printing game, but they did it with a splash. Last year, they generated a lot of discussion in the 3D printing community when they launched the AnkerMake M5 on Kickstarter. I covered that launch for Hackster.io and expressed a lot of skepticism because the campaign was making a lot of lofty claims that seemed too good to be true. It turns out that I was right to be skeptical because the subsequent reviews exposed the marketing claims as being either too optimistic or downright false. The highly advertised AI camera, for example, wasn't made functional until long after the printer's release, and when the feature was finally added, users said that it never worked properly. So I was very curious when AnkerMake reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to review the new AnkerMake M5C 3D printer. This is a stripped down version of the M5 that is more affordable and that omits some features. Most notably, it does not have an AI camera or any camera. It also lacks the touchscreen control interface, which I'll be talking about later in this review. The AnkerMake M5C costs $399, which puts it at the top of the entry-level hobbyist 3D printer market or at the bottom of the mid-range of the market. For comparison, you can get a Creality Ender 3 for less than $150 or a Bamboo Lab P1P for $600. The basic specs of the AnkerMake M5C are pretty standard. It has a 220 by 220 millimeter bed and can print parts as tall as 250 millimeters, exactly the same as the Ender 3. Like the Ender 3, it has a heated bed that can reach 100 degrees Celsius, and the axes ride on rollers, just like the Ender 3. So what sets it apart? The hot end can reach a temperature of 300 degrees Celsius compared to 225 degrees. The AnkerMake M5C has dual Z-axis lead screws, while the Ender 3 only has one. The M5C has fully automatic bed leveling, while the Ender 3 requires manual leveling. And AnkerMake claims that the M5C can print at much greater speeds. I'll be investigating those claims later in the video, but first I want to talk about my general experience. The AnkerMake M5C arrives mostly assembled, but the user needs to finish assembly by putting in a handful of screws. I timed that and it only took me 18 minutes to complete, which is pretty good. To get all the features, you'll want to download the smartphone app and register the device. There is a QR code that's supposed to link the two, but it didn't work for me and I had to add it manually. Not a big deal, but worth noting. It is, however, worth talking about the smartphone app, desktop software, and the lack of a control interface built into the printer. Unlike most 3D printers, the AnkerMake M5C doesn't have any kind of screen whatsoever. The only control on the printer itself is a single large play-pause button. The user can configure that button's functions with different actions for single press, double press, or long press. You can, for example, set it up so that a double press repeats the last print job. But I found that button almost useless and never used it. I can't remember what each type of press does, and I rarely need to reprint the same parts anyway. I think most users will do what I did, use the app and the desktop software. Both of those link to the printer over the network, which is nice, but they come with some frustrations too. That's because you have to use both. To control the printer directly, such as when you want to change filament, you need to use the app. To set temps or move motors, you need to use the app. But to slice a part and start your print, you need to use the desktop software. The app only lets you start existing G-code files already in storage on the printer. I found that back and forth to be annoying and would have preferred if the desktop software gave full control over the printer so that the smartphone app wasn't necessary. Moving on to printing, I will say that the print quality is actually pretty good. I got some light stringing on some parts, but otherwise the quality was very respectable. Because the AnkerMake M5C doesn't have an enclosure, I stuck to printing the PLA Plus that AnkerMake sent me with the printer. Most parts look good, even when printed using the fast profile. But the experience isn't all good. The AnkerMake M5C has silent stepper motors, so there's almost zero motor noise. That's really nice, but the fans are obnoxiously loud, which kind of defeats the purpose. The printer also spends quite a bit of time checking points on the bed for leveling, which adds a lot of time to a print job. It uses a 7x7 grid, so it has to measure 49 points. That's good for getting a nice first layer, but it would be nice if you didn't have to do so before every print. Then there's the speed. AnkerMake advertises a printing speed of 500 millimeters a second, an acceleration of 5,000 millimeters a second squared, and an extrusion flow of 35 millimeters a second cubed. Those are very respectable numbers, but they're also a bit misleading. If we look at that fast profile in detail, we can see that it really only uses the 500 millimeters a second speed for travel. The infill speed is 270 millimeters a second, the inner wall speed is 250 millimeters a second, the outer wall and top bottom speeds are 150 millimeters a second, and the initial layer speed is 50 millimeters a second. Those actual speeds are still really impressive and nothing to scoff at, but they do highlight AnkerMake's tendency to exaggerate claims in their marketing. The AnkerMake M5C is able to achieve its speeds thanks to the rigid frame. It is clear that this is where most of the money went. The base appears to be milled from a single piece of metal, and the Z-axis uprights are a sturdy square tube. I question the use of rollers instead of true rails and bearings, but they seem to work well enough. Overall, I think the AnkerMake M5C is a decent printer, has very good performance, and is well built, but I don't love it, especially not at this price point. AnkerMake is new to the 3D printing industry, and I don't think they allocated their budget for this printer in a sensible way. Was it prudent to spend so much money on a costly base and omit a conventional control panel? I don't think so. I was also frustrated that I was forced to switch between the smartphone app and the desktop software depending on what I was doing. If you purchase an AnkerMake M5C, I think you'll be happy with it, but I also think you can get a printer that performs just as well for significantly less money, or a better printer for the same amount of money. So that's it. Thank you for watching.